We are recording to the cloud, week 3 in R511 spring 2023. Now, the guest for tonight is someone I met before the cloud. There were clouds up in the sky that we could see, but not internet-based clouds. Yet, while she was studying as a master's student in my class, we were looking at basically analyzing keystrokes. And we had a grant from the National Institute for Teachers, National Association of Teachers of English. And so we did this little fine coding of each individual keystroke because that project led to other things such as collaborative technologies and technologies we'll call aspects, conference writing, other names, just like Google Documents today, which is up in the cloud. We were pre-cloud. We were just before web-based instruction is when I met Cheryl. Online learning was happening at the time, but web-based instruction was a couple of years away. Actually, it was being developed by Tim Berners-Lee in '89, and it went live in 1991 or 92. I think it was 91 on August 6th. I had the privilege of meeting Tim Berners-Lee on a bus ride to Riyadh, from Riyadh to a restaurant a couple hours away, and got to sit next to him and chat with him about the invention of the internet. He's a runner like I am and marks all his times according to GPS. We have someone else with us tonight, Cheryl Murphy, who's been engaged with web-based instruction since she was a little baby, in effect. As a master's student in my advanced doctoral student kind of a class, walking in and looking at everybody in the room saying, oh, I can sit in the back row and just kind of pretend I'm in the room, and we'll see if anyone notices me. But I did notice her, and I said, would you like to be on my research team after a couple of weeks? And she did, and Leanne Hill did as well, who was a guest last year in this class. Cheryl is now she's a professor at the University of Arkansas, but is also the vice provost, right? The vice provost of distance education, and she's involved in global online learning and all sorts of partnerships at the University of Arkansas, which we'll get into here in a little bit. I've sent you all her resume, very impressive that it is. And I'm sure you all have been thinking of questions to ask her during the day. I want to say a special celebration lights for her, because this is the first time, I think, in my 30-odd years of teaching, I brought Cheryl in as a guest. The very first time. So I stole these lights from a wedding I was at on Saturday so I can introduce her properly. We've got someone waiting in the waiting room. You got him, Christian? So Nicholas will join us too. I think we'll do A to Z, and we'll just do a lot of short answers, maybe, Cheryl, as hard as it will be, so that students can ask you questions, and maybe Christian can set up a Jamboard for us so that, have you already set that up, Christian? And you put that in the chat window? Thank you. Great. So, well, if you have questions for Cheryl, put them in the chat, and I'll be going to those questions from time to time and making you ask them, not me ask them. We do have a couple that I was sent via email today from one of my students, so I can get to those as well. I think maybe the most basic kind of a topic, Cheryl, well, even more basic. Why don't you fill in a little bit of the gaps about you and about your prior job duties and current job duties and responsibilities, so that people get more of a sense than just a hello from me and that Cheryl is great. Can you tell us a little bit more what makes Cheryl so great?
I'm sorry, I thought I came here to tell embarrassing stories on Kurt. So, maybe I got that all wrong. That's why I agreed to actually come.
That was the pre-session you had with Christian. He heard the stories, okay. And everyone who came late didn't,
Okay. So Cheryl Murphy, and as Kurt said, I met Kurt in my very first master's level class as a brand new master's student. Walked into the class, and I was the only master's student. Not only that, almost everyone else was working on their dissertations. And Kurt said, hey, Dr. Bonk said, hey, no problem, we'll get you there. And so started with the class, and then we just started working together, and I still see him at conferences and work with him as I can to this day. So he is one who will not let you step away. That's what I will say. If there are good opportunities for you to work with him, he's going to take advantage of that and help you out as well. So
let me just add to that a little bit. That was a course on social cultural theory, which evolved into a course named Thinking and Learning in Social Context, which I got on the books at West Virginia and then came to Indiana. It took me a few years to get it back on the books at Indiana, but it exists as P640. I think soon the learning science people will change it to I640. Anyways, a little fun story, a little fun factoid. I moved from educational psych to IST in 2005. I last taught that course in 2006. If you go to my homepage under syllabi, you will find that syllabus. However, when I asked to teach it again, the learning science people told me I am not qualified to teach my own class. So as you move into new, as you probably get this, you moving up and you go back to your old department trying to teach some classes, but anyways, that didn't make me happy that particular day, but I try and laugh it off. Cheryl, so fill in the gaps. Since you left West Virginia, went on to Arkansas, you've been there how long, and what roles have you had there?
Oh, wow. I've been here since the mid-90s. So I received my doctorate in the mid-90s, and this was my first faculty gig at the University of Arkansas. I interviewed, several places, as we all do. You go out, you interview, and you try and find the best fit. And I thought this was the best fit for me at the time. Quite honestly, like most people, I had to look up Arkansas on the map and figure out where the University of Arkansas was. Everybody says, is that Little Rock? Is that Little Rock? Turns out it's not. And but when I figured out it was in the mountains, and I'm a West Virginia girl, I thought, okay, this might be. So, so never, ever fail to follow up on a job just because you don't know what the place is like, because you never know. It turned out to be a perfect fit. And I had to look it up on the map, seriously, to figure out where I was going to be interviewing. And like most people too, I thought, well, I'll go there, I'll get tenure, and then I'll hop. And, well, it's been since 1996 and I still haven't hopped. So I'm thinking my hopping days might be over at this point. And, but, it just goes to show too, that you never know, you have these great plans, but if pieces are falling into place, if things are going the way that they need to go with the flow. And sometimes going with the flow means not going anywhere. It means just keep flowing. So that's what I did. I was a faculty member. I got tenured. And then I started doing a lot of service. I did a lot of teaching and worked on a lot of projects. When I first came here in the mid-90s, the Dean of Continuing Education at the time, the unit that I run right now, which is called Global Campus, was called Continuing Education at that time. And he had heard about this online learning thing. And he would come and just literally say, I need to talk to you right now. And it didn't matter where I was, meeting, whatever. And then he would just pick my brain about online learning, about learning technologies. And we became quick friends. And I made him buy my lunch after a while. So if he wants to pick my brain, he's got to pay for it. So make him buy your lunch. And we started with weekly meetings and eventually set up the first instructional design team to help with online learning, the first online programs at the University of Arkansas. Really started building that out to see what we could create. And he was very open to a lot of different ideas, and he had some money to spend because continuing ed was a moneymaker at that time. And so he was dumping a bunch of money in, and we built a huge team here. I decided to kind of step away from that. He left as dean. There were some other people who came in, and I decided to step away from that and to focus on faculty member stuff again. And also I got tapped to lead our teaching and our faculty teaching center on campus. So I led our teaching support center for about 3 years and did that, loved that, helping people integrate technology. They would call me the techie woman, whatever, and just, and, I had people who would challenge me and say, I bet you can't get me to use technology. Now I laugh at those people today because they're the ones still, writing paper checks, but it's all good. So, I did various things. And one of the things that I found is that the more that I stayed at the University of Arkansas and worked on the things that I was working on, the more opportunities I could make for myself. And that's something that you should look at. What are you really interested in? What do people need? And what do you want to do with your time? What is a good way for you to spend your time? And so for me, a good way for me to spend my time at various points in time was doing a lot of service, doing some research. I got to tell you, I did what a lot of people do. I got tenured, and then my research just plummeted for a long time because I got wrapped up in all these other projects. And I started, building online programs at the University of Arkansas. I started creating and building an instructional design development, learning design development teams across the campus. I started doing all those kinds of things that were very exciting and innovative. And so, I did some research, but not a lot. I did some service. I did a lot with teaching and learning because I really love teaching. I enjoy it immensely. And so I did a lot in helping other faculty who weren't quite as good at teaching as they wanted to be. And so I would mentor them or help them and just give them advice. And then I ended up going back into the research pot for a little bit. And I did some research enough to get me full professor, for a while. And they immediately tapped me for leadership position as department head. And they have a department, curriculum and instruction, which is the largest department on our campus, by the way, in terms of faculty. I had about 80 full-time faculty in one department. And that was huge. Yes. Everyone was very special, still is. And it's herding cats when you're dealing with faculty and when you're trying to lead a department. And that was a fantastic experience for me in leadership because I had been program coordinator. I'd run our programs. I had done some other things across campus. I'd run our teaching center, but I hadn't really done a lot of the personnel and budgetary things. I didn't really have some experience there. And so that opened my eyes up to a lot of different perspectives in thinking about budgets and personnel and policies and regulations and all that stuff that people don't think is fun. But I mean, that was 80% of what I spent, 80 to 90% of what I spent my time on. And it was a great learning opportunity for me. The other thing that I did in trying to learn some things was I became a peer reviewer in 2007 for a Higher Learning Commission, and that is an accreditation agency. I decided in 2007, after I was working in a teaching center at that time, and I just wasn't getting the perspectives of some other people across campus. I had my perspective, my understanding of higher ed and of teaching and learning and programs, but I just couldn't get other people's perspectives, and they were different. And so I decided I wanted to see a bigger picture. And I paid for myself to go through training, HLC training. And because I just really wanted that learning for myself, I wanted to know more. And so I became a peer reviewer for them. And then eventually I'm a team chair. Now I sit on their institutional actions committee. I've been doing it for numerous years now. And I have to tell you that and being a department head were two of the things that I did in my career that really changed my perspective of higher education tremendously. And so, I just put that out there for you. If you want to look at leadership, you have to understand other people's perspectives. And when you don't understand their perspectives, try to find ways to understand where they're coming from, because it means that you aren't seeing a full picture somewhere. And I've got to tell you, when I did the HLC training, once you see, it's one of those things, once you see it, you can't unsee it. Once you know it, you can't unknow it. And you only build upon that. It just builds and builds and builds. And so until I got to that point, I realize now I was kind of plateauing in what I was doing. And even if I was doing new research projects and things like that, I was plateauing in my overall understanding of higher ed in general and of how I could truly be of help and assistance to higher ed. So, you know, I'm just putting that out there. Some people want and like the idea of leadership. Some people don't. I didn't ever really seek to do the leadership thing, but I've never been shy. And so, you know, when I'm in a room, as you can see, I just talk, and I'll just talk to you all day.
And so I'll stop you from talking for a
Yes.
second. For those that came late, I did introduce Cheryl with lights that I stole at a wedding this weekend. So I'll reintroduce her with some lights. You didn't get to your current job. So briefly, what is the current role and what are you doing?
So currently I'm Vice Provost for Distance Education. I lead what's called Global Campus. We do all of our online programs, academic programs, and all of our professional and workforce development. So we have everything from media teams. I have about 80 to 90 staff members. I'm about 80 right now because we're down a few, but 80 to 90 is where we sit. And we're a service unit. We service the whole campus in terms of providing support for any online learning. We support students, all of our online students, or any students who are in our online classes. But we also partner with business and industry quite a bit to design, develop, training, learning, any kind of training they want, whether they want it face-to-face or whether they want it online. We also partner with businesses in other ways too. So I'll pause there.
Yeah. That's a lot. And people are,
Yes.
you know, kind of envious in some ways and taking note of what enables one to progress in one's career. You know, it's being willing to get additional training on your own, as well as when someone taps you on the shoulder, at least having a tentative yes or maybe instead of an immediate no. That enables people to move up and progress. At least smile once in a while when people ask you for a new role or to play on a new role. I was going to ask you about the online and blended learning trends within the field, but I think everyone's kind of aware of the impact of online and blended learning and what's happened in the 25 years you've been in, you know, at the University of Arkansas. Let me ask it a different way. Are there any trends in blended and online that are recent in nature that one might need to be aware of and have their antennas up in the air and thinking about?
Well, there are always things that you need to have your antennas up. This field that you have chosen, that you're in, is so dynamic and so exciting that if you're bored, it's your own fault. Because you've got corners in every room that you can look in and find and just do deep dives into the coolest things that you can ever imagine. So I'll start there. So don't be bored. Find something new if you don't like what you're doing. Lots and lots of opportunities. In terms of blended learning and trends, we're seeing a lot of, you know, of course, the pandemic changed everything. We have been trying for decades to get people to accept online learning, to get people to just kind of gravitate toward. We've been saying, you can do it. What you do face-to-face, you can do online. We've been that mantra for forever. And all of a sudden the pandemic came and boom, that's what we had to do. And we just leapfrogged by probably about another decade, how we were slowly advancing and getting people to accept online learning. Now that they have accepted it, at least in the understanding that we can do some interesting things here, you know, even those diehards will say, yes, you can do some interesting things. Since we've, you know, now that we're here in that place, people don't want to go back. People do not want to have one option for their delivery method of instruction or of learning. And, you know, the modalities and all those things, people are insistent on having options, insistent on having multiple sources of information. You know, I can remember as a kid, Kurt, you can relate to this, you know, we wanted to go and put a report together. We went to the encyclopedia, one source of information, the encyclopedia. Now, everyone wants all these new sources and they want to tap into all the sources and have all those resources and get it when they want it, how they want it, where they want it. And so that is a very different mindset. If you're from traditional higher education or traditional education, in period, this is a very different mindset. And we are trying to navigate the traditions of higher ed, and kind of blend those into the desires that people have now that they see what the possibilities are. And when you have new technologies, new things come about, there are always the barriers for integration, as you know, adoptions, very sporadic in some technologies. But when you have an event like the pandemic that just catapults you forward, the opportunities are tremendous in terms of getting into corners where they swore they would never do anything online ever.
Yeah, and that's
we
why
we teach CDL courses online. Scary, huh? Yeah, think about that the next time you pass a semi on the road.
And that's why we have every possible discipline is majoring in IST today or in ed tech today. People from radiology, nursing, from law, from business, from all sorts of fields. By the way, in the introduction, I forgot to mention, Cheryl mentioned hopping. She doesn't hop. She runs like me. She's a runner. I did forget that. So because of the pandemic, are people more like Asia today, where they bow and genuflect when they see me or anyone comes to visit, and big posters and celebrate, or is more like the US, where they put you on a dartboard and throw darts at you? Did you find during the pandemic they had more faculty who are bowing and they were appreciating, they didn't realize you existed, and now they do, and they're very happy to meet you and talk to you? Did you see more bows and smiles or more people throwing darts?
Well, I can always push people's buttons, Kurt. So I'm always going to have the darts. I'm always a dart dodger, right? That's okay, because I'm going to push the envelope a little bit. But for the most part, people were extremely appreciative. My teams are the ones who had to support the entire campus. They had no idea what to do, where to go, what they needed to know. It was a very traumatizing time for the campus as a whole. And for the country and for the world, because not only are we trying to figure out how to continue in our day-to-day, the pandemic, people were dying. And so emotions were very, very raw, and people were extremely vulnerable. And we took that into consideration, and we were extremely empathetic. We were extremely soft in the way that we approached, and as helpful as we possibly could be. And we were manning phones 24/7 for a while. I actually had some of my staff, we had 24/7 help, and we had people calling all hours for the first 3 or 4 weeks that we went completely remote. And then we were able to scale that back. And we called it judgment-free zone. It doesn't matter. You don't know how to turn on your computer. We're good. We're here to help you. Get on your cell phone. You don't have a cell phone? Okay, pick up your phone, dial it, and we're here for you. And that was just the consistent message that we sent across. And because of the way that we did that, people are still to this day extremely appreciative of us. They respect us because of the way that we treated them like humans who were in need.
No.
And that is both the students and the faculty and staff on our campus, because they were really struggling in where to go and what to do. And as you all know, we know what to do. They just needed to give us a little bit of room to do it. Yeah, some support, help us do it, and we got the job done. And we helped them, we eased them in, with scaffolding, all the things we used, we did all the things. And now that has gotten us a seat at pretty much every decision-making table that's on campus. I can't think of a decision-making committee on our campus that I don't have at least one of my global campus staff on. And that is unheard of for most campuses.
So if you're one that likes to work with people across campus, likes to work with the diversity of folks and make an impact, getting to administrative side of online blended learning, technology integration, academic technology, teaching and learning centers, any of that and more, that's where to go. Cheryl, this week's about instructional design models. And I was going to ask about, you said you have an academic team that designs your instruction. So I'm going to lecture after you're gone and follow instructional design models, but it's best to find out what you're doing. But I'm going to not ask that right away. I've seen Jennifer smile. I saw Tiana smile at least 5 times. And we got 6 questions already in the Jamboard. I'm going to give the first option for asking a question to Jennifer or Tiana. If they don't have one now, we'll go to the Jamboard. Tiana or Jennifer, did you want to jump in?
Well, I mean, I was smiling because I enjoyed how she interrupts the room. And she, so I smiled about that because that tends to be my role here in Luddy. But a question I do have, as I was thinking, because I mean, you talked about the pandemic and everything else, and I was trying to type on the Jamboard, but whatever. What has been the most challenging thing for you to implement in distance education, either from working with the students or your administrative staff, with faculty, staff, and everyone else? What has been the most challenging thing for you over these years?
Well, I'm still working on it.
Right.
And part of that is helping to build pathways for education. And I've been talking about this for years. People are now coming on board, but helping to create pathways of education. Not everyone wants to come to a university or can come to a university and take 4 years of their life to get an undergraduate degree, or 6, as is most cases. Or they can't just walk away from their job and go get a master's degree or a doctoral degree. So what are the options and opportunities for them? And so my passion, I had limited education access when I was growing up in rural West Virginia. I want to provide access to education to everybody, regardless of where they are and their situation. So how do I do that? And that's what I've been working on for decades. How do you do that? The problem is higher ed is not set up to facilitate that. Higher ed is set up to facilitate, you drop everything, you come to our campus for 4 to 6 years to get your undergraduate degree, you drop everything, you drop out of your job, you come and you get your master's or your doctoral degree, and it just hasn't been as conducive for those people who can't just walk away from the rest of their life to do that. There are some of us who are fortunate, and I was fortunate. I was able to do that. I felt extremely fortunate to have that experience. But for those people who cannot, what are we offering them? Are we just throwing them away? We can't do that. And so for me, trying to get higher ed to create the structures and the infrastructure that will let people come in and out as they're able, to let them, maybe they want to start with a non-credit, something non-credit, and get a Lean Six Sigma certificate or some kind of a Microsoft certification or something like that, and start there. And then can they build that and maybe stack that in and build that into a micro certificate at an undergraduate level. And so all of a sudden they take 3, 4, maybe 5 classes, and it's almost like a minor, and you get a micro certificate that says you are proficient in these things. And that helps you get a job in a field. And then maybe you can stack that into another certificate, and maybe you can stack that. And eventually, as you're ready and as you're able, walk through those career pathways, if you will, building that out for people and letting them come in and out, and knowing and recognizing that the 18, 19-year-old student, freshman, is not the student that we're going to be serving long-term. That is not who we're going to be serving with the enrollment cliff and all those things. That's not who we're going to be serving. So trying to get our infrastructure at the university set so that we can very efficiently serve those learners, and I call them learners, I like to call them learners, not students, those learners who are just wanting to come in and out, and they have to come in and out, because that's life. That's the way, that's life for them. Really working to get our systems so that we can do that and support them the same way that we support the students who are able to come to campus. I know the experiences are different, but at least not put up barriers for them, take down those barriers, give them those pathways, those opportunities. And that has been difficult because people see higher education in a very traditional way. And what I'm talking about is not traditional higher education.
Yeah.
But it is the reality of higher education for a lot of people. So
Yeah.
that's something that has been very difficult for me. We're working on it. We're getting there, but it's been difficult for other institutions as well.
That's why I call myself a non-traditional learning researcher. That's really what I'm interested in, is not school, in effect. You know, I was going to go to the ID models, but I'm not going to do that. And I was going to go to the Jamboard, but I'll wait on a student. So next thing we'll go to is a student question from the Jamboard. But before I ask that, you segued up to question 2, which has to do with micro-credentials. During the recent times, what are you seeing about the potential of micro-credentials, some of the barriers to implementation of micro-credentials, your views about the micro-credentials? Might they be the end all and be all 20 years from now, and that's all we're going to be getting? Or what's your vision and what's happening now?
Well, sure. Well, first you have to understand that it's that old debate of, is higher ed meant for workforce training and development, or is it meant for different types, of learning, liberal arts studies and that kind of thing? You're always going to have people who are back and forth and debating on those. I don't see it as that kind of debate. What I see, micro certificates, first of all, we do have micro certificates at both the undergraduate and graduate level here at the university. I just got that instituted about 1.5 years ago, so that we have those, and they're transcribable. So if you get one, and that's all you get, you can come in, get one and leave, and you get it on a transcript. And that's 4 credit. Now, what about the alt creds and the other micro certificates and micro credentials that you don't have academic credit for? Part of the problem is that everyone wants to define it, what it is, and everyone wants to regulate it, what it is, because people want to get financial aid for it. Companies want to provide their tax incentivized education benefit to their employees. And so the whole micro credential area is just ripe for lots of innovation, but right now it's a tug of war. It's a real tug of war. And if you read anything about it, you're going to see that companies want to go this way. Google certificates, Google certifications, all those things are floating around. They've created their own. So is Microsoft. Microsoft's always had their Microsoft certifications. People are acting like this is something new. It's not. It's been around for a long time, but it's really catching on. And part of it is because the value of education has diminished in the public. And by that, I mean, it's not diminished completely. It has... people are starting to challenge, is it worth it to pay that much for higher education? And am I really getting the benefit out of it that I'm paying for? And employers are starting to say, you're sending me graduates, but then I have to train them for 6 months before they could even do anything. What are you doing in college? Aren't you teaching them anything? And so there's this whole perception about higher education. Higher education is getting a bad rap lately, and over the past couple of years. So as that's happened, and as people are really reconsidering the value of higher education, business and industry took that as an opportunity to slip in and say, well, guess what? If I want my employers to know X, Y, and Z, then I'm just going to do certifications in X, Y, and Z, and that's it. And I'm not even going to require higher ed degrees. You may have heard the state of Maryland dropped the requirements for a bachelor's degree from 75% of their jobs, and Pennsylvania just followed suit. States, for state workers, aren't even requiring bachelor's degrees. What are they requiring? They're requiring competencies, skills, micro certifications, micro credentials, or ways to prove that you have the skill sets that they need in order for you to do the job.
Sounds like Western Governors, which will be a guest of mine in a little bit in my Silver Lining for Learning podcast show. They're in Fayetteville. You have a partnership with Walmart. And again,
yes.
before we go to the Jamboard, you want to, it's corporate university partnerships are growing in this age of micro credentials. And now we're fine tuning, we're personalizing, we're individualizing the contents of one's degree or certificate or micro credential based on employer needs. Has that grown in your 25 years, and how has it changed?
Yes. So, in higher ed, we used to have the attitude in higher ed of, okay, this is the degree we're offering. If that's what you want to know, great, come here. And if not, sorry, that's what we're offering. And, take it or leave it. We know, and we're the experts, so take it or leave it. It's not that way anymore, really, because businesses are walking away and they're leaving it. And we're like, hey, wait a minute, we're the experts. And we're like, no, we don't care. You aren't producing what we need. So, this is a very different time in higher ed for us. And I'll give you, so not only is Walmart in my backyard, I can get to Walmart's corporate headquarters, international corporate headquarters, in less than 20 minutes from where I'm sitting right now. I can get to the international headquarters for Tyson Foods within 15 minutes. I can get to the international headquarters for JB Hunt, think supply chain, all those things, in 10 minutes from where I'm sitting right now. I've got huge businesses and corporations in my backyard. They all want training. They all want to interact with the university. But I can tell you, I was just talking to Walmart again. Yes, no, it wasn't yesterday. It was last week, toward the end of last week. I meet with them almost weekly. They want those career pathways for their employees. That's what they're looking for. Their employees are working full time. They don't want their employees to stop working full time for them. They want to provide them education as they're able to and as they can go along. And so we are just, we're perfectly matched and partnered together in the ideas that I'm trying to enforce and to put into place here, and what Walmart and Tyson Foods and JB Hunt, what they're all saying that they want and need as a large corporation, as a large business. They want to partner with academic institutions, but they don't want the take what we have or leave it mentality. They want us to work with them in partnership so that they can help us in terms of understanding what's really happening in the business world for them, and how we might adjust our curriculum, and sometimes it's just very small little tweaks that we can do in our curriculum that will benefit them tremendously with the employees that they're hiring that come from us, that get their degrees.
You're upskilling and reskilling.
Absolutely.
And you
All the above.
recently got a major grant. You want to tell people what the dollar amount of that state grant was and what it's intended to do?
Oh, sure. We've got about 20 million that we're floating right now, but that we're working on and finishing up.
Just 20 million. Take or leave a million.
Well, we got
when you're a
$13.5
faculty member,
million
you never got a $20 million grant. Now the responsibilities would bring with it opportunities, right?
So, I say 20 million because I'm actually working on a proposal right now that's not with an M for me, it's with a B for billion. We've got two of them that we're working on. So
the lights come back.
One's with a private funder, and one is a consortial kind of thing with multiple states from the federal government.
Everybody's going to be sending their resumes after this show,
So we get, during the pandemic, workforce upskilling, reskilling was a huge need, and everyone was home. And so they wanted to take advantage of that time to upskill, to reskill. And, so it all had to be online. So Department of Ed, it's a DOE grant, Department of Ed put out a call to all 50 states through their workforce development offices and said, hey, we will take one proposal per state and look at them and decide what we're going to fund. And we'll fund 3, maybe 4 proposals. All of a sudden, if you've ever written a grant, that you've got like 1 in 50,000 chance, usually. All of a sudden we had 1 in 50 chance. Or maybe 1 in, if they were going to fund 4, the math was phenomenal. Our chances of getting a grant was extremely high in relation to other grants that you would get. And so we started talking to the state. It had to come through the Division of Workforce Services in the state. So we had to partner with the state. We started saying, hey, can we help your grant writers? And they're like, grant writers? What grant writers? We're trying to upskill. We're in the middle of a pandemic. Can't you tell? We got all this other stuff going on. People, And so I said, okay, no problem. How about if we write it, talk to you, figure out what you want to do, and we'll write it, and we'll just oversee it and do it. And I said, okay, help yourself. So they didn't think we really would. We came back, started working on it, got the grant together, and they were blown away. They're like, wow, hey, this has been phenomenal. So we said, so we're submitting it? Yeah. And of course we got 13.5 million. And some of the money does go to the state. We got about 10.5 of that. And the rest is going to the state and another partner that we have. And you know, so sometimes you just have to do the work for other people. And, you know, it was really up to them at the Division of Workforce Services to submit a grant. Our state would have never, Arkansas would have never submitted a grant. They wouldn't have. They didn't have the people. They didn't have the personnel. But it's a 1 in 50 shot for a grant. So sometimes you just have to do the work for other people to put yourself in a situation. And so we said, hey, we'll do it. And we're still doing it. We were supposed to get 2,000 enrollments in upskilling and reskilling within a 3-year period. And we just finished our 2,000 enrollments right before the holidays, 9 months early. And so they've given us more money to just keep enrolling people. Just keep going, keep going. You're doing great. And
So-
they've asked for extensions if we wanted.
So
So-
Cheryl, I sent an email to everybody and I was wrong. I didn't introduce her properly because there's no way she could be a vice president, a vice provost. She'll be provost soon. Take out the vice. You don't want to have vices anyways.
I don't want that job. I am where I need to be.
Well, you've got job security with that kind of money. Let me tell you, in today's age, it's all about grants and funding and all sorts of things. We should go to the Jam board. And now I have 3 questions for you to end with, but let's go to student questions for a while here. Does anyone want to jump in? We've got, I could share my screen and just show you the Jam board. Here we go. So Cheryl, we see all these questions there. Does anyone want to jump in and ask one of these pink or green or yellow or orange questions?
I can jump in because we're talking about workforce development. And that was my question. And that's what I've been curious about is, and I'll just read what I put here, is how would you describe the differences between the online courses that you're designing for your corporate partners and those that are intended for the more traditional university students? Is there serious differences, meaningful differences? How would you characterize them to others?
Oh, absolutely, seriously. So for corporate partners, and in particular between non-credit and credit, we actually have courses that we've built out for credit, and they're 3 semester hour courses that we have broken out into modules and turned into non-credit stackable modules in non-credit that a learner can go through themselves without an instructor, and they can go through and get the materials. We've provided scenarios and case studies and stuff in there that they work through, and added some things that you otherwise, some of that interaction that you would otherwise get in a 3 credit hour class. So we've fabricated some of that and added it in these smaller modules that again stack into, and they can actually turn into this 3-hour course. So it is very different when you have a 4 credit course, a 3-hour 4 credit course. You have a lot of regulations. So distance education is very strongly regulated when it's 4 credit and when you're getting financial aid for it. So, you know, you have to have things like substantive interaction and, you know, regular and substantive interaction. You have to have a lot of different types of assessments and those things. Well, how do we marry those two? Or what's very different about, say, a non-credit training module that you've broken out? You aren't going to, they want to do that whenever they have a minute to do that. So it's asynchronous, completely asynchronous, usually learner-led with no instructor or little instructor interaction. And so you have to provide those supports that you would have normally gotten from the instructor in either a live or an asynchronous way during that 3-hour, or you would have gotten from that regular and substantive interaction from your peers, and putting things like case studies, scenarios, and even having characters that walk through the stuff with people and narrate as if they are an instructor. And that way you don't have to have instructors leading those non-credit pieces, but you still sort of have an instructor that's leading those non-credit pieces. So it is different, but it's the same content, the same outcomes overall in terms of understanding What should they know and understand? And as learning designers of learning, you know that there are many different paths that you can take to get to that outcome. And so you think about, what is the outcome? What should they learn? What should they know? And if that's the same, then you can design the way that they get there in many different formats, many different modalities and ways. Now, the thing that gets a little bit tricky is if the outcome's different. So in other words, you know, does that person who's just going through it for non-credit really need to know 5 in-depth theories of supply chain? Probably not. They just need to know the basics of it. And so, you know, if the outcomes are different in what you're trying to accomplish, then that is a little bit of a different process that you would look at. But you always start with, what are the outcomes? What are the things that they need to know? And then taking a look at how you would best instruct based on who the learner is, and what kind of time they're going to spend with it. What kind, you know, what's the situation? What's the instructional situation, the context? And you know, we do everything. We run the gamut in terms of our non-credit, everything from SHRM certification, which is HR management, to healthcare. And if you mess up in the healthcare, that's pretty serious. So the outcomes, you have to know whether or not they're getting what you're teaching them, if it's medically related. Whereas, you know, some of the other things that we teach, for example, we have a non-credit history of football class that if people don't get it, it's not life altering, and that's all right too. So what is the content? Who's the audience? You know, the history of football, we put it out there. It's an academic class that we have, a 3-hour 4-credit class. We turned it into a non-credit class to appeal to OLLI members, to appeal to our alumni, to, you know, very different reasons why we're putting that out there. So that's not one that we would stack into 3 credit, because
what's OLLI?
Lifelong Learning Institute.
Okay.
Sorry.
So we have a 1 credit.
Aside from your dog.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. We have, Oliver, my dog. We have a 1 credit on Indiana University. It's all about Crest toothpaste, because when Crest toothpaste was invented at Indiana University. I bet you none of my students knew that. Let's go to the next question on the Jamboard. Who'd like to jump in here? And by the way, Matt, did you get what you wanted out of that?
Yes, I thank you. I appreciate that.
Okay.
Sure. I just wander in my conversation. So if I don't answer your question, just ask it again. I'm sure I'll have something to say.
All right, thank you.
Anyone else want to jump in?
One thing that's been coming to mind for me as I've been doing readings is that it seems like, depending on what disciplines people are coming from in any given IST project, there's going to be different views about what education and learning looks like. I'm sorry, I'm reading out the pink one. I should have just read it straight off of there instead of saying all this. But anyway, yeah. Have you learned anything managing any conflicts arising from that when there's lots of different people working together and different ideas?
Yes. And so that's the wonderful thing about academe, and that's the challenging thing about academe, is that everyone is right, first of all, and no one agrees. So, you know, how do you have both of those things? Well, you can have both of those things. Again, you have to boil it down to those basic questions of, you know, why are we doing this? You know, what is the purpose? What are the outcomes? Who are the learners? And just really boil it down to the most basics, and then start building it back. Because I often find that many times when people have differing opinions about how to do things, it's because they have different ideas of what the outcome should be. And if you can have very detailed conversations about what the outcome is going to be, what that outcome should be, and you can agree on that, then eventually you can come in and yes, people are going to have to give a little here and give a little there, that kind of thing. But if you come to a consensus about what the outcome should be, then ultimately you can find consensus. Now, if you can't come to any kind of an agreement on what the outcome is, that's a different conversation, and that makes it much more difficult. But oftentimes when people are not agreeing, it's because they have different perceptions of what you're trying to accomplish.
Yeah.
I
Okay,
don't know if
next.
that answers your question or not.
Oh, yeah,
but-
that is, that helps. Thank you.
Next, anyone want to jump in on the Jamboard? Jennifer, did you have anything on the Jamboard? You were one of the first ones here.
No, not tonight. I'm just listening in for now.
Okay, Christian always has things on the Jamboard. Christian?
Yes, yeah, actually, all the yellow ones are mine. But I think that one of the most maybe impactful questions would be, how do you see the realm of traditional higher ed learning changing in the next 5 years and in the next 10 years? I'm sorry, 20 years.
Well, one, I will be retired by 20 for sure. So that's going to change my realm, but it's not all about me, right? Higher ed is changing dramatically, and it's being forced to change actually more than ever. The companies like Google, Microsoft, a lot of the places that have traditionally not done their own training or done some, but not all, are actually training their employees now. They're bypassing higher ed, saying we can do it better. But if you read, look up some literature about durable skills versus just kind of flash in the pan skills. Because, for example, Amazon's spending $700 million to upskill, reskill their employees. But what they're training on are these very specific things that they want them to do in their Amazon warehouses or in their Amazon databases or whatever. And those skills aren't transferable. Those skills are very limited, very set skill sets. And so one of the things that they're already uncovering, and this has been going on with Google for a little bit, this is also going on with Amazon, is that they can't move those employees that they're investing the training in. They can't even move them to another position because the skill sets aren't transferable and they don't know how to transfer. They don't know, they don't have that, problem solving ability and those skills that we talk about in higher ed. And so there's this pendulum swing that's going on. And this isn't something that's new. It's a pendulum swing. You can look in the history, Kurt's nodding his head, the history of higher ed, that it goes between we should be doing all workforce preparation. That's all higher ed should be. And then, no, we should all be nothing but liberal arts and sit and philosophize all day and all night, and this pendulum just swings back and forth. And right now we're starting to kind of boom, crash in the middle almost. Because at some point people get tired of the same old argument and then they just decide to take their ball home. I'm taking my ball and I'm going home and I'll do it myself. And so people are trying to do that themselves now with the Googles and the Amazons and all those things. And higher ed is scrambling a little bit because we have another thing that's coming. We have what's called the enrollment cliff. If you haven't heard about that, it is impacting four-year colleges already. I'm on the IAC committee for HLC. We reviewed over 70 institutions in November, and more than a handful of those were reviews because they were shuttering because of lack of enrollments, because they are already having that enrollment problem. We aren't seeing that in R1s. That's not what we're seeing. We're seeing everybody flock to R1s, but we're seeing it in four-year colleges. We're seeing it in community colleges. These are things that are changing. And a lot of the people that Google, Amazon, and these companies are training now, they are the people who would have gone to your community colleges or some of these four-year colleges. So, and not only that, but we're getting hit by that enrollment cliff. And the enrollment cliff is basically, we don't have the same number, we will not have the same number of 18, 19-year-olds 2, 3, 4 years from now that we even have today. That traditional freshman class is going to shrink tremendously over the next 5 to 7 years. And depending on where you are, it's already hitting some parts of the country. Northeast, it's already hitting. And so when we have less traditional age students, we need to figure out how to serve non-traditional students better. And that is, that's right up my alley. I'm so excited about it. I don't know if you can tell. So excited about it because that's exactly what I've been talking about for years, giving every learner the opportunity that they deserve, the access that they deserve. And that's where the pendulum is swinging right now, because one, we didn't have enough babies back in the early 2000s during all the financial crisis, which is leading to the enrollment cliff. So we aren't going to have those 18, 19-year-olds coming in, and businesses are now, and even states are saying, we won't require a college degree for you to come work for us. So even those high school students that we do have that are graduating out are saying, do I want to take on a couple $100,000 worth of debt, or do I want to go to Google certificate, get a certificate and go make 30, 40, 50, $60,000? We have an IT readiness. It's a 6-month training. And right now, JB Hunt, we can't put our students in there enough, and they come out and make $75,000, right? Like that. 6 months of training right out of high school, $75,000. That's as a start. And so, so we're looking at that, and you're saying, where are we going? We are going to have to adapt in higher ed. We're going to have to understand the demands and be a little more flexible. I'm not talking about giving up who we are and saying no to liberal arts and all those things, but we are going to have to be more flexible. Instead of just saying, this is what we offer, take it or leave it. We can't have that stance anymore because they're leaving it. And financial situations are, you see everyone with the financial situations that the pandemic has brought, and then now the inflation and things. They need jobs, they need high paying jobs, and they need them fast. They don't need them 4 years from now. And so, just all these things are converging and causing higher education to really re-examine where we go next. And if I have my way, we're going to serve all learners, not just those 18, 19-year-olds. We're going to find ways, better ways to serve all those learners. And we're going to create those pathways that are much more flexible. Not bending so much that we break who we are in higher ed, that we aren't true to who we are in higher ed, but enough that we are actually serving and providing education. That is our role, provide education, help people get access to education so they can improve their lives. That's what we're here for. And we've got to find new ways to do that match our society today, and where we are financially, where we are population-wise, where we are in terms of how frequently people change jobs now, and how frequently the job skill sets that are needed change. I can show you pictures of electric flying planes, EVTOLs, electric vertical takeoff and landing vehicles that are flying right out of the airport right by me right now. Drones, all those things. The technology is changing so fast. Our books that we bind can't keep up. So we've got to shake it up a little bit. We've got to move a little bit. And I think that we will. And I think that we can do that without losing who we are in terms of higher education, in terms of how we're grounded, our traditions and stuff. But we are going to have to be more flexible than what we've been in the past. Mm-hmm. And if we do that, then we'll be around in 20 years. If we refuse to do that, I'll be retired. That's what I know.
No, I'm not going to let you retire. You're too smart. We need you. But I will say that you could come here right now and take my place, because everything you just said is exactly what I would say. And it's exactly what I said in The World is Open book and other books I've written about making things available and flexible for the learners of tomorrow that we have. The pendulum does swing, but the K-12 too. It swings from progressive education and open classrooms and learner choice and autonomy and exploration and inquiry-based learning back to the standards, back to the basics and assessment and, having these standardized test scores. It's every 10 years it swings, or at least 5 to 10 years it swings, but just like higher ed one. I will also say that Rovi Brannon spoke in our class in the fall semester. Rovi talks about the 60-year curriculum. He's the provost at, vice provost maybe it is, at the University of Washington, and their continuum college, basically outreach and extension there. So Rovi's another one that we might want to, we brought him in the fall. I'm not sure if we can bring him back in again, but if you're interested in what Cheryl's saying, I'd read from Rovi Brandon, or you get Chris Deede's book from Harvard. He has a book on the 60-year curriculum about lifelong learning and that kind of thing. Does anyone have a quick question before I go to my final two? Because we need to let Cheryl go here in a minute. Does anyone have something that's pressing that they need to ask? And apologies to Christy, my student, if I may have said the 8 o'clock or 7 o'clock or 6 o'clock, the timing, we started about an hour ago. Sorry, Christy, but we did record this. I can send this to you. Any comments before I ask the last two? So Cheryl, you set up this one question that I was going to ask at the end, but we're going to talk about instructional design after this, and it's not my favorite topic. I'm an ed psych person, so are you. Instructional design is kind of blah blah to me, to be honest, but it's changing and it's getting much more eclectic, much more about engagement and interactivity than it was when I was trained in it. It used an old behavioral model, step by step, right? So that's changing. So I wonder what your ID teams, you had 80 people, or you have 80 people underneath you. And for the next 4 or 5 weeks, we're going to have people that are at the level 1 or 2 levels below you and doing instructional design or management of instructional design, or might be leading teams, small teams. So we're going to hear from people in the trenches the next few weeks. What you got, Christian? Unmute, Christian.
It is the Dick and Carey model.
Oh, the Dick and Carey model. Okay, there you go. Exactly. We're going to
Famous.
show. We'll put that on the screen here after break. In fact, so Florida State models. We don't like Florida State too much, do we? So, what models or model, or if you design your own model, and then as a part of that, what competencies and skills are needed today by all these people here to be hired by somebody like you? What are they going to need to get one of these? Because you have this $1 billion grant, and you have lots of job opportunities. So what design models do you use, and what skills and competencies in the field of learning, design, technology are needed today and tomorrow?
This is, so I've got about 10 instructional designers, actually 12, because 2 are working on the grant. So 10 full-time instructional designers. I also have, I think, 3 or 4 learning technologists that help them. And then a couple of student engagement specialists that help as well with the types of student engagement that you can build into classes and such. And that's in one team, one of our teams. And I've got a couple of managers that oversee those teams. So that's a big part of, that's a really big part of Global Campus. And one of the things that I'd say is, if you talk to all the instructional designers, all 10 of them, and you said, what model do you use? They would say all of them. And, that, for theorists or whatever, it's like, oh, what are you talking about? But there's a point in time where there's a practicality to it. And, one model for everything is that's just not feasible in what we do and who we work with, and how we're working with faculty from every single discipline that you can imagine, with every single theoretical foundation that you can imagine. And for example, as a requirement, as a federal requirement, you're supposed to have the objectives or outcomes for every class. So that's supposed to be identified as a federal regulation in an online class. And I had a constructivist faculty member who absolutely refused to identify any goals or outcomes. Yay.
Let's just say one student last semester didn't like my class because I didn't have the objectives for every single class session,
Yes.
and every single guest we invited, and didn't see I had objectives on page 2 of the syllabus. I had a lot of them listed, but anyways, wanted me to objectify, and I don't believe in objectifying everything. By the way, what you're saying now about being more eclectic, about overcoming all these battles were being fought when Cheryl
yes.
was finishing her doctorate. When I got to Indiana, they were fighting all the time. Faculty are
Oh,
fighting,
yes.
the behaviorists are fighting, the constructivists, they'd fight at the AERA conference and yada, yada. So I talked about in the last chapter of The World is Open book, we have to stop debating. All theories work to some degree. Parts of them work everywhere. The guy who hired me at West Virginia, who Cheryl knows, Rogers McAvoy, picked me up at the airport, and he had a hole in his suit about all through his. I looked at him. I said, "I'm not going to be paid much here." And and then Rogers gets in his truck. He puts me in. He says, "I'm a Rogerian Skinnerian," which means that he's a humanist behaviorist. And that's really, he was right. Rogers is right. We're all behaviorists to some degree. We're all humanists to some degree. We got to be more humanistic today than we had to be. We should be. We have to express more empathy today and perspective taking and so forth. But we have to stop battling and fighting and all this. So I just want to pull that out. I find that to be very, very important. Competencies. So we're eclectic. We can be flexible. What competencies and skills would you say are near the top of the list when you're looking at people to hire?
The flexibility. So having a firm understanding of the theories is good, and knowing why you would use them and when you would use them. That is something that we do look for. But having personal interaction skills, being able to talk with faculty, and I can say this because I am a faculty. I still am a faculty. We are prima donnas, and you have to have a lot of yes, you too, Kurt. Yes, and you have to have a lot of patience, because telling someone like Kurt, no, that activity is not really the best activity that you should use in your online class, is going to drop like a lead balloon. And, so you have to know and understand people, but you also have to know and understand teaching and learning, and what works, what doesn't, what are you trying to achieve, what are the outcomes, and having the ability to recognize how the pieces fit together perfectly. Because you know what, I could develop a course that maybe Julie Vargas or somebody help me create.
They don't know who Julie Vargas is.
You, Kurt. I can build that course for you, and it doesn't matter how amazing that course is. If the instructor can't teach with it or won't teach with it, it's not going to work. And so there's not just building a course. When you're designing, it's not just about designing. It's about what can the person who's going to deliver it, what can they do, and what are they going to bring to it, and how are they going to interact with that course? And then the learner, what are the learners bringing to it? And even if you and the instructor are on the behavioral side of things, if your audience isn't really, then you're not speaking their language, and you're not connecting with them, and you're not giving them what they need. And so it's all of those things. It's not just about you and what theory you like. It's not just about the instructor and what theory the instructor likes. It's all of those things and what you're trying to accomplish with it. So you really have to be very flexible, and you have to know how to talk to prima donnas, because that's
so the questions you're raising about who's the audience and for what purpose, who controls, I'm going to be ending with after break. Those are that's the last slide of mine, the last two slides. So, and there's someone else's question who lives in Bloomington here with us. But you mentioned Julie Vargas, and I'll tell everybody who's from Bloomington or ever been there. Julie Vargas's sister was born in Bloomington, Indiana, and raised in the Skinner box. So Julie Vargas is B.F. Skinner's daughter, who I'll be getting to in a couple weeks on behaviorism. I had the office next to Julie Vargas, and her husband was on the other side of me. All these behaviorists or behaviorologists working with me at West Virginia, and they didn't want me to be hired because I was a cognitivist. They didn't believe in cognitive theory. It was a fiction and not a useful fiction to them. They went to the dean's office to stop me from being hired. You can imagine once you were hired and then you had your office situated in the middle of the three behaviorists, what a fun time that was. But Julie was actually a very sort of humble person compared to the other two. I like Julie. I don't know if she's still alive, but interesting. And I did get to meet B.F. Skinner briefly on the phone. I talked to him when he was dying the last year of his life, 1991, during APA when he gave the final address for the APA as a keynote, American Psych Association. So I did briefly meet him. So thanks for bringing that up, Cheryl. So my last question for you, and we may have one from some of the students here. So Chat GPT, it's making the news and the headlines, AI in education. You know, we talked about this yesterday when we talked on the phone a bit, and you have your perspectives about ChatGPT. Today, there are 2 more articles in Inside Higher Education. There's one article in the Daily Mail in the UK. There are 6 articles I made PDFs on, if anyone wants them, from last week in the Chronicle of Higher Ed and Inside Higher Ed. If anyone wants them, I'm saving all these. I have a team starting to do research on AI, ChatGPT, in particular, doing language learning research. So you have faculty asking you about ChatGPT undoubtedly, or administrators above you asking about, what are you telling them? What are you finding out? What is your perspective on all this, the impact of AI in education and the deletion of writing centers on campus as we know them?
Yeah, so Mondays is administrative meeting day here.
Ah.
And so I was in meetings with deans all day today and other vice provosts and the provost and chancellor, so this was a hot topic and people are freaking out. They're freaking out. Oh my gosh, how are we ever going to know if this was written? And, the essence of what is being said, and people are holding emergency meetings in different colleges this week about Chat GPT. And my sense, that they asked me, what do you think? How are we going to, control this? Is what they said. And I said, that's exactly the problem. You want to control this. And as new technologies, as new things emerge, that's one of the first things that we do. We try to control it. We try to keep everything the same. We try not to evolve, not to continue to grow. And so my answer and what I'm saying to our campus is, it's not about how are we controlling it, it's how are we harnessing the power of this new tool to advance us even further? What are we doing to make even further gains with this new tool? And it's just a tool. And and how are we using it to figure out how to build better widgets, to do things differently? And does that mean that we're going to have to evolve some with it? Yes. So when we have new technologies that come along and when the first instinct is to just control it so that we can manage and stay the same, that's a knee jerk that in higher ed has not boded well for us. And so I'm trying to get people to not necessarily embrace it. They don't have to just love it to death. That's okay. We don't have to embrace it, but we have to not try to suffocate new advancements, because those advancements are not going away. AI is not going away. I told you about, we have drones that do drone deliveries here, that are actually programming themselves now. We have Walmart trucks that run down our roads, semi trucks that are autonomous driving vehicles. Again, I'm scaring you away from semis, right? Talk about CDL training, talk about autonomous 18-wheelers driving right beside you. We have AI is not going away anytime soon. Your Roomba, I mean, come on. We are integrating that into all these different aspects of our everyday. My refrigerator tells me when I need to get some milk. I mean, that's amazing. Why are we trying to push it down and stifle it in higher ed, where we should be advancing it so much further? And yes, does that mean that we're going to have to change some of the things that we do, like some of our assessments, instead of relying on that paper the way that we've always relied on that as our assessment? How many methods of assessment do we know? I mean, I can think of probably 10 off the top of my head that don't involve writing a paper. Why are we stuck on a multiple choice test or writing a paper? Why can't we assess other ways? I mean, this isn't rocket science here. We can assess if that's what we're using it for. We can find other ways to assess. We don't need to suppress the inventions that are coming along that can really help us and move us in different ways that we've never been able to move before. And so, just because it's going to be a little inconvenient for us to find another way to do our daily, we should not dismiss these great tools that are coming about. Businesses aren't dismissing them. They're embracing them because they're trying to figure out how to leverage these new tools to make themselves even more money and to be even better. Why aren't we figuring out how to embrace these tools to make ourselves even better?
That's a good point to end with. I know you got tons more to say, but that's I've cut you off because maybe someone has a comment on any of this. I know Jennifer's at Dallas Community College. You've got her awfully worried about the demographic cliff happening there in the community colleges. She's taking copious notes and so forth, right, Jennifer?
Hey, Texas is not, you're going to increase it by 4%, by the way. I know that because we steal a lot of your Texas students.
It's above my pay grade right now. I'm very new, but I know there's a lot of talk and work going on about how to do what you're describing about the workforce alignment. I'm not in on all that right now.
So we have two people from Texas by way of Chicago. They're actually living in Chicago, working for Baylor University in Texas next week. Two of their current students, a master's and a EDD student. So they'll talk about Texas. Any final comment from anyone? Or question, comment? Christian has his hand up. Mika, you're in Maryland. What's the college you work at?
Fortunately, I don't work for a college.
That's right. Okay.
Well, unfortunately, I work for an outpatient facility, and yeah, so it's a little bit different. Yeah.
But impacted by all this, no doubt.
Yes, yeah. So some of us have been talking about it, Chat GPT, and because so some background, I'm Cheryl. I'm a speech and language pathologist, and then I'm also an EDD student. So a lot of the assignments that some of the clinicians may give to students who are struggling with literacy, maybe writing, or they have to go home and write a narrative after watching something. So we've been having conversations about that. How do we know that they won't be using AI to help them or to produce the work that we assign? So the conversations are there.
Good. Amelia's coming from Japan and she woke up early. So maybe she wants to say something before we end. Amelia?
Yes. I'd just like to thank you so much for mentioning what you called to create pathways for people. And being in Japan, this is one of the pathways that is created by distance learning. And I really appreciate the chance to join in. It was fascinating. Yeah, thank you very much.
Not just Japan, Kyoto, Japan, I believe, right?
Yes, it's a wonderful morning here in Kyoto. It was a wonderful way to wake up and hear all these new ideas. I was off camera just writing notes. There was so much going on, and I'm going to look over those, and just really a lot of great information.
In fact, we have two students from Japan in this class of 16. So there we go. The first time I think I've had two students from Japan in one class. Christian's had his hand up forever, and he always has his hand up. Christian, you get the last word before we end with Cheryl here and take a break. Christian.
So just real quickly, I can't imagine what the office pranks were when you were there between all the behavioralists, but
oh God, we'll have a beer on that, Christian. When you come down for the IST conference, anyone who's at IST, I'll talk about that after the IST conference at Lenny's.
Cheryl, so you talked about we can't bind our textbooks fast enough because there's just so much information out there that's being churned out, and it's happening very quickly. All of the new, we're finding out new things really quickly, right? So what about using Chat GPT as a textbook type of tool where it's creating meta-analysis for us, or it's analyzing all the content and bringing it to us in a personalized way?
And that is exactly what I'm talking about, of harnessing the tool to make what we do easier, better, more up to date. Those are the types of ideas that we need to be spurring, that we need to be pursuing, instead of trying to squash a new invention because it's, So yes, as a matter of fact, I might steal that idea actually and use that as an example.
Go for it. I've been thinking about it for a little bit, so if you need any prompts, I'm
Okay.
I'm happy to connect.
So we should thank Cheryl tonight for coming in the first time in my 3+ decades of teaching, and to give her a round of applause here. She is not only an accomplished professor, a vice provost, an accomplished runner, a skier, water skier, but she also is a surviving member of the Condiv Connectors softball team, which tied for first place at West Virginia a long, long time ago. I don't even know what position you played, but we did win a couple of games. And so again,
I was the after, that was my best position was.
at the Wooden Nickel and at
At the Wooden
Gibby's,
Nickel,
sure, and
yeah.
at the Boston Beanery, all three.
That was where I really shone.
If anyone goes to Morgantown someday, we'll do a meetup. That's a great city, actually. So thank you everyone for coming. I'm going to take a break for about 5, 6, 7 minutes. I'll come back and talk about instructional design models. And you know, if you're not here, I'm going to make this a separate recording. So I'm going to stop this recording right now, and it'll go up to the